welcome back to another episode with Fight Night Picks. As always, we're brought to you by SimBody. Vertiball is now SimBody. If you head on over to their website, simbody.com, you're going to get all the great products that you know and love, including the SimBody Vertiroller and the Vertiball that you have seen most likely here in studio. Look at that. Place it, lock it, attach it, Vertiball, all sorts of great stuff over there if you want to roll out those old tired muscles and you don't want to go with that old lacrosse ball. They're also coming out with that very new product that you can see right in front of you. And if I head on over to my cart, look at that. I've already got a Vertiball over there. Little bit of a deal right there. And if you hit the try for 60 days risk-free, use the promo code FNP, you're going to get 20% off your order with that code FNP at simbody.com. You're really helping out another local company here in New Brunswick, Canada. Can't wait for it. The new name, SimBody at simbody.com. And as we always say, let's get into it.
A last look at the big card. Be sure to head into the chat and have your say. Let's get into it and join in Fight Night Picks ? Kicks.
And just like that, we're back, we're live, and we're set for UFC London coming up this weekend from the O2 Arena in, you guessed it, London, Ontario, Canada. No, I'm kidding. It's over in England, and the fights are back. And we have a big-time card coming up today. Everybody loves these afternoon cards. The chat is already off the hook. Alan Moody hanging out. It Could Happen 21.
Everybody?
Wake Up the Uma. Joe. We got Peter Shea, Sharif, Rob G, Kristen, Jacob, Hype 3 MMA, Chad's hanging out. Matt, it is a packed show that we have for you today. And this is a really interesting card. I mean, it's a shame that we cut a big, long promo about picking Nathaniel Wood's next nickname. The man gets incredibly vascular, and then ultimately the fight falls out. Davy's still in the Navy. Grant wanted that fight, but
got compliments on the bit, though, so good job.
Yeah, so there is that. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to this fight card, it should be a great one. And listen, headlined by Tom Aspinall and Alexander Volkov. We were kind of talking about it before the show even started. The lines on this card are absolutely juiced. Like, I don't really have much going on this one, so take that for what it's worth. But overall, it should be a great one. And usually when those lines are juiced, you end up with a couple of big-time upsets.
I think this could be a great card to watch, though. And anytime they go to London, it always is a really good card. They always get a lot of those, English fighters on. And it's always main event. Traditionally, Michael Bisping was always the main event of these shows. And then Darren Till kind of carried that torch for a little while. And it's been a few years since we have had one of these UFC London cards. So it is really nice that they're going back. And I think this main event is a really fun one. With Alexander Volkov, he's a wily vet, to say the least, extremely well-rounded at the heavyweight division. He's a little bit leaner than he has been for his last couple fights, and you like to see it. And I think this fight against Aspinall is a very important one, because Aspinall right now is probably the UK's best chance to win UFC gold. So if he is able to beat Volkov, that's maybe one more fight until a title shot. And with Dana White talking about all this interim title talks right now, if Aspinall looks really impressive and cuts some great promo after the fight, we very well could be talking about Tom Aspinall potentially be fighting for a title just after today.
John Jones, Tai Tuivasa, full-time firefighter Stipe Miocic, who will be in line for that title shot.
What a triangle.
But it should be a great one. And with Volkov, yeah, he's 10 pounds lighter than his last time out. And really, I mean, it's 253 and 252 between these two guys. Tom Aspinall comes up a little bit. Ian Campbell hanging out in the super chat. MPTV saying, Lakers, baby. Russ is back.
I don't want to talk about that shot. I almost threw an Xbox controller. I was really upset.
Well, we have a look at the card, and we're talking about a possible fight of the night. We've got Jack Shore taking on Timur Valiev. Lined incredibly close. It has moved throughout the week, and that's going to be a conversation of today. But lucky Timur Valiev, a guy that's really well-rounded. Jack Shore, we saw some improvements in his striking his last time out against a very short notice Ludwig Shalinian. But really, he gets his bread buttered when he takes it to the mat and tries to sink in that rear naked choke. So I love this fight. Could you imagine if Jack Shore went out there and did the old rude boy Randy Brown single arm rear naked? Could you imagine?
It would be absolutely insane. And the great thing about Jack Shore is that he's in a similar position career-wise to where Bryce Mitchell was a couple fights ago. We all know what his strengths are. He loves getting the fight down to the mat. We know how good he is once he is able to get it down there. But he is improving his striking here and there. And like Bryce Mitchell was able to do against Edson Barbosa, he looked pretty good on the feet in moments in that fight. So Jack Shore is able to keep on progressing, similar to what we've seen out of Bryce Mitchell lately. I think Shore could be a very hyped up contender here very soon.
Big time opportunity. If we switch it to our second pick, we had Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker. Now, obviously, this is the graphic from earlier on in the week. We have it updated in the question mark kicks file, if you want to call it that. But when you look at it, Dan Hooker, he makes weight successfully, 145 on the nose. And there were a couple fighters moving weight classes, landing right on the nose, and then their opponents weighing in an extra pound. Like Ilia Topuria moves up a weight class, weighs 156. Dan Hooker, 145. For Arnold Allen, he came in at 146. But when you look at this fight, I think this is going to be a great one. I mean, Hooker on the scales looked really good. And for Arnold Allen, a guy that we just don't get to see very often.
Exactly, and that's the worst thing about Arnold Allen. Like, I can't really take anything away from his skill set. He's very good at everything. But inactivity really has been his issue as of late. Really throughout the past couple of years. It's like, wow, you had this really great performance, and then 12 months later, it's like, oh, Arnold Allen's scheduled for another fight. So if he could get a little bit more consistency throughout his career, it would be great. But this fight against Dan Hooker is one of those, like, time to nut up or shut up. Because Dan Hooker, no matter what, he makes it a tough fight, win, lose, or draw. Maybe Michael Chandler is able to beat him kind of fast and save the Islam Makhachev, but you get the idea. He is in those fight of the night style fights every time he's out there, and you know the style of Arnold Allen is tweaked towards that.
It is Todd Johnson who's tuning in. We've got Kristen hitting up the chat, Phoenix MPTV, and Donnie Dimes as well, and it is going nuts. So yeah, I mean, let's have a lot of fun. Let's fill up that chat, the comments section. Continue to let us know who you have in these fights. Toss us a like, and if you haven't already, subscribe for some more great MMA content. We just filmed an episode of Early Stoppage last night and had a lot of fun on that one. Not much chatter on this because knowing that this card is going to come out nice and early, we hit up some of the big topics in MMA. So ultimately, with question mark kicks, we always go from the bottom of the card back up to the top. And like I said to start this one off, the lines are absolutely juiced. So there is a lot of pop and popcorn for me. I know especially. I got some of the lines early last week, like Topuria and so on and so forth. But when it comes to this one, it should be a great time. And Steve for Prez saying Lock of the Night and Clint both super confident on Hooker and Volkov. But what do they know? They know a lot. They really do. They're two heavies in the game. So let's start off at the bottom, Matt. We have Muhammad Mokaev taking...
But never bet Sam Alvey. That's just a rule for life.
Well, Muhammad Mokaev coming in, taking on Cody Durden. And Mokaev, for what it is worth, is a giant favorite in this fight. And this is one that I said at the start of the week. I see this one a little bit closer than even some of those opening odds. With Cody Durden, he's one of those tricky guys. Now, Mokaev opened. And this is just at open. Minus 180. He's a minus 490 favorite average on best fight odds. Cody Durden is now a plus 370. And if we go over to at Fight Night Picks for the total votes, they're not even close. 86% going with Mokaev to 14% for Cody Durden. And for Durden, he had a competitive fight his last time out against Aruchi Long. And then he kind of spit a promo that was a little awkward and definitely didn't age well as soon as it came out of his mouth. So when it comes to this fight, Matt, for Mokaev, whether it's KHK MMA, whether it's one of his local gyms that he's training out of, this guy was a British champion in wrestling when he was very, very young. And you got to consider it, too. 6-0 with a no contest as a pro. But 23-0 amateur, 2 IMMAF World Championships, European Championships as well. This guy, when it comes to what he specializes in, it's his wrestling, it's his grappling, and it's his striking in his scrambles, which is something that we don't say very often.
You're right, and with Mokaev, it's interesting. I'm glad you bring up his amateur career, because it's weird. In boxing, if you have a long amateur career, that's normally a really good thing. That's something we point to say, wow, you're going to have a lot of success at the majors.
Vasily Lomachenko.
Well, not even just him. Like, there's almost too many examples to go on. In MMA, though, half the MMA fighters have never had an amateur fight. It was like, okay, I went pro, and they just kept on having pro fights. So it is interesting when you do have prospects who have had multiple amateur fights, because they normally are a little bit more seasoned than you would expect. And that's kind of what you see out of Mokaev. I do agree. I like his striking on the inside. His grappling and his scrambling is really unique because he's so explosive with it. And I do expect him to win this fight the first time out. But it will be interesting to see if this fight will kind of help us set a ceiling for him moving forward, because that's sort of where I see Durden as an opponent.
And it is a really, really stacked card. I was somewhat surprised that they just tossed this one in as the first fight of the night, but if Mokaev's able to get a big win, expect a big promo out of him. For Durden, though, you look at it, I mean, in the UFC, Cody Durden's in a spot this weekend just like Kazula Vargas. You're being brought in to lose against a super hyped up prospect. But for Durden, he did have that big 10-8 round on short notice up a weight class against Chris Gutierrez in his UFC debut. He did lose to Jimmy Flick, where he got way too hot-headed.
It's pretty cool, though.
Way too heated. And then he has to win over Arichi Long. We haven't really seen him tested all that much with the grappling, so I will be interested to see this one. Rob G saying, what if Durden just lays him out? That would surprise me. Adam is saying Durden by upset. And Queen Radiant saying, I would love Cody to win. It would definitely make things interesting when you knock the prospect off a block. We've seen guys come in at flyweight like my guy, Manal Kopp, who really had to kind of find his way after a few fights. And now, all of a sudden, he's right back up there. But I do expect Mokaev to get the win. Again, he is a juiced-up favorite, so I don't really have much of a play on this one.
We're going to be saying that after a lot of fights on this card, but I do like Mokaev.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it doesn't disappoint, but that's just the way it is. We have Cory McKenna taking on Elise Reed, and Spams L2 saying Rob G's a troll, kick him out of the chat. But Spams L2, Rob G's in the chat every single weekend. I'm not kicking him out. We're all friends here. Make friends over in the chat. So we move on and we look at Elise Reed and Cory McKenna, and these two are polar opposites. This is a clash of styles. You look at Elise Reed, she has a great Taekwondo background. She has a great military background as well. And for Cory McKenna, she's just going to continue to grapple. And when you take a fighter from Wales very early on in their career over to Team Alpha Male, I expect them to progress. The one thing that scares me a little bit with this fight, and we talked about it at the start of the week, Elise Reed loses a short notice opportunity up a weight class against a great grappler in Sergei Eubanks.
A mythical figure at 125, some might say.
Cory McKenna has been out for a very long time due to concussion issues. And she took, about 4 or 5 months off. She's been cleared for 4 or 5 months. So she has been training. She has been active in the gym. It's just when a fighter has concussion issues really early on in their career, it does make you worry a little bit. Now, again, when I look at this fight for Cory McKenna, another big favorite, another one of the bigger movers and shakers this week. She opened a minus 180, she's minus 279. Elise Reed, the comeback, plus 227. Has a win over Jasmine Jasdavicius that really does age well when she was only 1-0 in MMA. But Matt, when I look at this one, I do expect Cory McKenna to have a lot of success with the grappling. If not, definitely could get interesting for Elise Reed.
The issue for Elise Reed, though, is that even though she was fighting a really good fighter in Sergei Eubanks, who is a really strong grappler, Elise Reed didn't show that much defensively with her grappling. I think that's something we can all admit to. And with Cory McKenna, like you said, it's not the fact that she is a really good grappler, it's that it doesn't stop. And even if she isn't able to secure that first takedown or the second takedown, the pressure will not stop. And yes, you worry a little bit about some of those concussion issues, but I would much rather hear about a fighter taking time off and actually looking after themselves than just rushing into another camp and then figuring out more injuries. And then we hear about more issues down the road. So for McKenna, I kind of like hearing about a younger fighter sort of looking after themselves, taking that time away. And the other thing too, when you have a prospect as young as she is, they can improve an insane amount in just a short amount of time. So perhaps with this year off, Cory McKenna might be a much more improved fighter this time around. Even if it was the version of her that we saw before this time off, I would still probably like her against Elise Reed. And I'm assuming that we're going to see a better version of McKenna this weekend.
And Isaiah Pouncey saying Reed easily. If you're going with Reed easily, you got to let us know how and why. Why, Isaiah? Why? Out of the votes over on at Fight Night Picks and the Instagram stories, 83% going with Cory McKenna, 17% going with Elise Reed. So again, Cory McKenna is a pretty big favorite. The concussions, I just want to see another opportunity for her out there fighting. So this is another bit of an opportunity to gain tape against a fighter in the UFC. Not that there isn't a lot of tape out there already. I've got McKenna. You've got McKenna as well.
Without a doubt.
All right, so we move on. This could be a very quick show. But wait,
this
there's
fight's
more.
Awesome.
So we have a possible fight of the night. We have Jack Shore taking on Timur Valiev. The line is very, very close. I do want to hear from everybody over there in the comments section. Chad saying McKenna by sub. Clay is saying McKenna by round 1, round 2 sub. Queen Radiant saying but taking Cory. And Sabas Garcia saying most confident is Paul Craig. So Matt, we look at the odds for this one. I think this does tell the story. It's one of the closer line fights this week. They opened at par. Jack Shore went up.
I don't even think Paul Craig's brother is confident in him this weekend. So I'm sorry to whoever said that in the chat.
Somehow Jack Shore was a plus 150. You could have had him last week at that.
I wish I did.
Minus 116 as he is right now. For Timur Valiev went down as far as minus 182. He's a minus 103 as it sits. So in the comments section, Laos Nan is saying Shore by decision. Ghost is saying took Shore out of my parlay at the last second. Gazbach. Reed beat the Canadian fighter who debuted a couple months ago, Jasdavicius or something like that. LOL. She did, but I thought Jasdavicius won the fight. But regardless, when we look at this one, Jacob Kelling saying Shore should be the favorite. I mean, again, Shore, A, is an awesome fighter. He's undefeated. His striking's improved, but his grappling is where it's at. I got 2 turntables and a microphone. For Timur Valiev, he really is a more dynamic fighter, but his ground game isn't like Jack Shore's ground game. He isn't take you down, gain position, wear on you, switch position, going from guard to half guard to side to mount. Like, he isn't one of those fighters. Timur Valiev's a little bit more slippery on the ground. He can leave some more opportunities where he could get exposed. He is the way more dynamic fighter when it comes to his striking in this one. So I love this matchup, Matt, and we disagreed on the pick at the start of the week.
We did, but I can still agree with all of the points that you had about Valiev, and he is the more dynamic guy in the feet, but the weird thing about that is it does leave more opportunities for him to get caught. I'm not saying it's going to really affect him in this matchup, but and people are going to like this name just because he's a polarizing guy, but like someone like Sean O'Malley, for instance, who can really find those openings in your striking, he would give Valiev issue. And I know, wow, the ranked Sean O'Malley would give Timur Valiev an issue. What a hot take, Matt. But you get the idea. With Valiev, he's one of those swing big, miss big on the feet, especially compared to Jack Shore. And that's why I do think on the feet, Shore is going to have quite a bit of issues in this fight. I really do think it's going to come down to how does he effectively utilize his own takedown attempts, because Valiev can scramble quite a bit, but I do think Shore at least is going to be the steadier fighter throughout this fight with his takedown attempts. He might not be as flashy with some of the takedowns he goes for, but just some of the single and double leg attempts that he can go after, they don't require a lot of energy to go for, so I don't really see Jack Shore tiring himself out to a Dada 5000 type level to where Valiev can just sort of tee off on him in the third round, defend some basic takedowns. I think this is a great fight, but I do think that if Shore is able to get this down to the mat, he just saps the energy out of guys. There's few guys in the UFC. I put him in a category with like Gregor Gillespie, that's another name who comes to mind. Islam Makhachev, of course, is in that category, to where when guys are on top of their opponents, they're not just doing damage, they're taking all the energy out of that bottom fighter, and I really do think Jack Shore has that type of a style, so I think if he can get the takedown early, he's going to take a lot more out of Valiev than Valiev would be able to take out of Shore if he was the one to get on top.
When you have a look at Timur Valiev, you got to consider international master of sport in pancration. Ha! He's also master of sport in Sambo. And when you look at the numbers for both these guys, like I see it up there in the comment section, I think it was Mr. Guy, Valiev sucks, went to decision with Martin Day. He beat the tar out of Martin Day in that fight. He took him down constantly. He's able to do those things. And again, he has good defensive grappling. So when you look at this fight, again, Jack Shore always improving. Timur Valiev, for what it's worth, we've known about this guy since World Series of Fighting.
It's been a while, yeah.
He's been the same fighter the entire time. He had a really tough second round against Raoni Barcelos his last time out, getting outstruck, getting knocked down. But in round 1, able to defend some takedowns, able to work in the striking. In round 3, he looked really good. So it's one of those ones where it's a little bit of a learning experience. We already talked about the odds. And I always find it funny when the odds are lined really closely and that 75% of the fans at Fight Night Picks have one fighter over the other. It is a bit of a surprise. So 75% going with Jack Shore. First, last thing, Shore was great at plus value. I'm going to Timur Valiev still as my underdog pick on this card. And it's not like Craig, you don't like Jack Shore.
Shore's the underdog, isn't he?
I love Jack Shore as a fighter. No, he's a minus 116.
Oh, yes, sorry, he was earlier.
So the odds have flipped. But when I look at this one, I just like what Valiev brings as a total package. Now, listen, do we get that bill of goods this weekend? We're going to find that out today. But again, I know we're split on this pick, but we can definitely kind of highlight the strengths and weaknesses of both guys in this one.
Yeah, without a doubt. I still do like Shore, though.
All right, Matt. Alex Gagnon saying Valiev isn't the dog. Let's have a look one more time. Best fight odds. So we got the averages. Timur Valiev, minus 103. And for Jack Shore, minus 116. And there's some sites that have him as even, and there's some sites that have Shore as high as a minus 120. So we'll move on to our next one. And we have Nikita Krylov taking on Paul Craig. And for Paul Craig, the retirement tour continues. Now, will he get like a Coach K retirement tour? Will he get the David Ortiz? Will
have
somebody
all of his close friends in attendance while he loses his last game at home?
Maybe. But this is a big opportunity for Paul Craig. And again, we look at it, the highs have been very high. He has a win over a main eventer from last weekend in Magomed Ankalaev, and he also has a loss to Alonzo Menefield. So it really is tricky when you do look at it for Paul Craig. Now, Tim Apple's saying, Craig, let's go. And listen, do I get gassed up by all the comments that just say, Craig, let's go? Craig, come on. Because I know they're not talking about me, but Donnie Dimes is saying, Craig, Steve for Prez, your dog of the night is even money. Brah, I really hope London judges give us robberies we deserve. Oliver is saying, so Matt, a lot of people talking about Paul Craig in this matchup. Do you still have Paul Craig in this matchup?
Here's the thing, this fight's gonna go one of two ways, and I don't think it goes any other direction whatsoever. Either Nikita Krylov takes down Paul Craig early on in this fight, the dumbest thing a human being could do, ever. And there's a lot of dumb things you can do. But taking down Paul Craig early in an MMA fight is at the top of the list, because for no reason, he is the most dangerous man off his back in the UFC. I know we talk about Damian Maia, Jacare Souza, Fabricio Verdum, some of the aging vets in the sport as some of the all-time great submission specialists. I kid you not when I say Paul Craig deserves his place amongst some of those great submission finishers, because at least in MMA, and I understand, in the greater jiu-jitsu world, Paul Craig does not have the accolades that some of those other fighters do. But his BJJ for MMA is absolutely ridiculous. Offensively, defensively, you cannot grapple with this guy whatsoever. And for Nikita Krylov, look at his record. It's the most ridiculous record you've ever seen in your life.
He knocked out Walt Harris at heavyweight.
At heavyweight, never had a fight, or never won a fight by decision until recently, but is very good offensively with his grappling, yet somehow awful defensively with his grappling, and that's not really the type of skill set you want when you're about to fight someone like Paul Craig. And that's why I think either Nikita Krylov keeps this fight on the feet for a total of 15 minutes, and here's the thing, yes, he was able to knock out Walt Harris at heavyweight. I don't actually think Nikita Krylov is this, like, top-tier striker. He's a little stiff. He has a good jab. He's a big guy for the weight class, frame-wise at least. Like, he is quite wide. So he is able to strike at range. But when he does fight the upper echelon strikers in this weight division, you do see him struggle quite a bit. So I do think on the feet, it won't look all that pretty. But I do think Krylov's at least good enough to win a decision on the feet. But if this fight hits the mat for even 1 minute, I do think Paul Craig's going to win by submission.
I absolutely love how nobody is picking Nikita Krylov in this fight. You have a look at Fight Night picks, 63% going with Paul Craig. All of the comments with Paul Craig, and when you look at the odds for this one, Nikita Krylov is the favorite. He is the third biggest mover and shaker on the card at a 62% clip. He opened plus 134. He's a minus 197 as it is. Paul Craig at a plus 164. Somebody had mentioned that the odds for a Paul Craig sub plus 280. If you like it, that's the way to go. If you like it, that's cool. But for me, I have Nikita Krylov again.
And I also didn't answer your question.
Well, he's super in terms of like defensive liabilities when it comes to grappling, in terms of giving up positions, in terms of giving up time when it comes to striking. Nikita Krylov does that with the best of them. And he has trained at Global Fight Gym. Sergei Pavlovich has been there, and he's also on this card. But when I look at this, I mean, for Krylov, he's a much better striker than Paul Craig. If you can force Paul Craig to strike, it is not pretty. If you can force him to grapple, hell, if you can make him grapple into striking, look at what he did to my guy, Shogun Hua, his last time out. Tap, tap, tap due to strikes. But again, for me, I'm going to go with Nikita Krylov. And yeah, you're switching the pick here.
I didn't answer it. That's the thing.
Go ahead.
So before we started filming, I told Craig I'm only thinking about switching one pick, and it's Paul Craig to Nikita Krylov. I'm going to stick with Paul Craig. I almost did. Because here's the thing. Nikita Krylov has to not make mistakes to win this fight. We can all agree on that. Because for Paul Craig to win, he has to capitalize on a mistake that Nikita Krylov makes. It's not like Nikita Krylov is some mistake-free fighter. He does at least at one point throughout most of his fights take it to the mat or miss on something, and I do think Craig's going to be able to snatch up some kind of a submission.
The best part about it, I mean, Paul Craig always has good weigh-ins, and everybody there, you know, obviously the win over Ankalaev, it ages incredibly well. The win over Jamal Hill, it looks so good considering what those two guys have done. Magomed Ankalaev made a fatal error with about a second left, and Jamal Hill pumped the tires on his own grappling and then went in there and engaged in it, which was silly.
Paul Craig was still able, though, to put on the armbar and the triangle choke to win those fights.
And that's the second part of the equation. They were great wins. So I disagree with a lot of people out there, and that's fine. That's the best part of the show. None of us have to agree on these picks. So we move on to our next fight, Matt, which I don't anticipate a lot of people are going to disagree on this one. Shamil Abdurakhimov is 40. He's a man, and Mike Grundy might like him. He opened a plus 235. He's plus 266. For the man himself, for Shamil Abdurakhimov, this is one of those ones. If he can go out there and grapple Sergei Pavlovich, he's going to have a ton of success. Sergei Pavlovich, for what it's worth, as this big of a favorite, can he knock out Shamil? Sure he can. His grappling's not that great. So if you really like Sergei Pavlovich, I would caution you there. I don't necessarily love him in this spot as a big favorite. I have him to win. Certainly, you look at the boats at Fight Night picks, 78% going with Pavlovich. But again, Not a great grappler. We don't necessarily see him tested because he's knocking guys out quite quick and early. But again, it does caution me, worry me a little bit because for both of these guys, not incredibly active, but more so for Pavlovich because this is a guy who hasn't won a fight since 2019?
My issue with Shamil, though, is does he even know what he's good at? Because it's been a while since we've really seen Shamil go out there and kind of work his game plan, which is I strike into the clinch, I get the fight to the ground, I use ground and pound, I can threaten with subs, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. It's been a really long time since we have really seen him go out there and use that game plan. Against Curtis Blades, he just was on the defensive end and wasn't really defending much of those takedowns. And against against Chris Daukaus, he did strike with him quite a bit early on in that fight. I just don't think Shamil Abdurakhimov at this stage of his career has the gas tank that can support a wrestling heavy offense. So if you don't have the gas tank that can support your wrestling heavy offense, then you're not wrestling probably as much as we would like. It's like, and this is fresh in my memory, Dave Steve didn't want to throw his slider as much in 1986 because he hurt his arm. So he wanted to throw the change up a little bit more, so he could save his arm. With Shamil, it's kind of similar. He wants to save his cardio, so he doesn't want to go for a lot of takedowns. But the issue is, when he's not going for a lot of takedowns, he is getting exposed as somewhat of a wide striker. And that's kind of the best term I have to describe the striking style of Shamil Abdurakhimov, because it's not bad. I don't think he's a bad MMA striker.
He had a good start against Chris Daukaus,
exactly.
kind of.
He landed some accurate shots, even from a long distance, which isn't an easy thing to do. But the problem is, when he leaves himself open, it is a massive gap. And with someone like Sergei Pavlovich, who, I agree with you, defensive grappling, not his strength whatsoever. But when he hits with a lot of force. And I really do think that Pavlovich is going to stand at least early with Pavlovich.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we're both of us going with Sergei Pavlovich. A lot of people mention that reach advantage for Pavlovich, but listen, reach advantages don't always tell the whole story, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on this card, and we've seen that even in the past couple of weeks. There's a lot of fighters who like to fight in a phone booth that have giant reach advantage or get backed up quite often, and they don't really mean a lot. Stefan Struve is another guy at heavyweight where that was incredibly apparent. So, again, I wouldn't put this on anything. It's pop and popcorn. These are ranked and unranked heavyweights, but they're right there on the fringes. Sergei was ranked until the last couple of weeks when they popped Sergei Spivak up there for just sending Greg Hardy into the shadow realm. So we'll move on, Matt. We'll talk about Mike Grundy, who's taking on Makwan Amirkhani. And for Mike Grundy, I have to issue a bit of a retraction. I said Mike Grundy's brother had some fights coming up. He's 17. He was 1-0, and I think he had a DQ here last weekend. It's his son Jack, competing. So that's pretty cool. And for Mike, he gets a big-time opportunity here. Now, we didn't even talk about it. Cage Warriors had a giant card last night. It's great to see that when they parlay it into the big fights like this. And for Makwan, I kind of look at Makwan as an underdog in this opportunity, and Gunnar Nelson, who's a big favorite on this card, as guys that SBG, where you at, bud? Because for Makwan, he's training back home in Finland. It's Loop Martial Arts. It's MA Academy, his own gym. And for Gunnar, he's training at Mjolnir, so that's cool. But when I look at this one, Mike Grundy, Team Cowbon, obviously Darren Till, a main training partner, Tom Aspinall there as well. I look at this one, and first last mentioning it too, I see Mike Grundy, his father's really not well. He's going to be in attendance for this one, so hopefully he's able to put on a great performance. But I look at this as Makwan has great grappling, but he's not even known for his grappling in the UFC. He's known for a wild highlight against Andy Ogle that everybody loves to show. And Mike Grundy has not looked good in the UFC. Let's all face facts.
I think we can agree.
He has not looked good. His Nad Narimani win, he gets friggin' rocked and he's baby deer legs, and then he comes back. Nad turns off the gas a little bit, and then Mike lands a crazy left hook and then goes in for the finish. So when I look at this one, I do have Mike Grundy, but this is another one where this could totally ruin your parlay. Mike Grundy is what? Minus 204 favorite. It opened a par. Makwan like a plus 170 or thereabouts. So again, I have Mike Grundy, but it's not the most confident pick on this card.
I've seen the people in the comments getting ready for what I'm about to say about Makwan Amirkhani. Here's the thing about Makwan. I'm looking for a fighter who's not very durable, doesn't have the most heart, when he gets into tough fights becomes a lesser version of himself, is a good grappler but for somehow can't secure a takedown against anybody who has any level of grappling, and their only highlight is, like you said, something that's not even their specialty. Like, Jorge Masvidal, for instance, a very good striker. Someone we can all agree is great at MMA striking. Won a fight via flying knee, but it's not like after that we looked at that and said, hey, he's going to flying knee everybody from that point on. That's legitimately the only bright spot of Makwan Amirkhani's striking throughout his UFC tenure. He's very stiff on the feet, and he just kind of volume shoots for takedowns if he isn't having success on the feet, which is in most of his fights. And if you go back to the Edson Barbosa performance, and I know Edson is a very good fighter at this weight class, but the second he gets fatigued, it's a lot of panic takedowns, and it's not really him fighting to win, it's just him fighting not to lose because he doesn't want to get hit anymore by Edson. And even go ahead, and I know I'm bringing up good levels of competition, but these are the guys that Amirkhani was expected to beat at one point because he was a hyped up prospect. He was just never really able to evolve his game, and I put Makwan Amirkhani in that Ben Simmons category, to where, like, you like doing your sport, but you really just like the other stuff that comes along with it. And I don't think that Makwan Amirkhani is looking at his MMA career being like, I'm getting to the top and I'm going to fight for a belt. I do like Mike Grundy in this matchup because here's the thing. Amirkhani is going to be able to grapple in this fight, but I don't think he's going to be able to have the cardio and all the top pressure that a lot of people expect. I do think that if he is going to have success, he will be able to use his wrestling, but I do think Grundy is at least the superior grappler in this.
And to give Spams L2 your due, because you did hit up the super chat and it's moving really quick, so it's a big apologies that I did miss it, but when we look at this one, he was mentioning that Nikita Krylov is favored to win by decision at like a minus 200, I think you had said. I want to go up there and make sure I get it right. It's way up there. Why is he favored to win by decision? It really is tough, but you look at it, I mean, for Nikita Krylov, his only decision win is a fight against Johnny Walker, and he's so hot and so cold, but I don't know if I expect Krylov to beat Paul Craig by submission because Paul Craig is so good defensively when it comes to his grappling. When I look at it, though, it's a tough one either way. I mean, both guys are finishers. I would think it ends in a finish. Personally, I would.
But here's the problem, and this is why it probably will go to decision if you like Nikita Krylov. Nikita Krylov's finishes by TKO and by submission normally come on the ground. And if you're going to play around on the ground with Paul Craig, you're probably going to get finished yourself. So I think it speaks more to just how these guys match up. Because Krylov, if he is going to get a finish, really does need to use his grappling if he isn't able to get that one shot on the feet, like a head kick or some kind of straight shot on the outside. So I could see this going to a decision, honestly. And I really do think that if it does end inside the distance, more than likely it'll be because Paul Craig just lashed on with a triangle or something.
All right, Matt. So we'll move on to our next one. And this is when we kick off the main card. We have Jai Herbert taking on Ilia Topuria. And when you look at this fight, I mean, for Ilia, he had that camp. Now, somebody hit up the comments section and said, no, but this happened in his last camp when he's supposed to take on Charles Jourdain. But the post that I saw was from late February, which was after that original booking. So Ilia Topuria training at Club Clement with Guram Kutataladze and Merab Dvalishvili.
Where you at, Guram?
He moves up a weight class for this one, and we talked about it at the start of the week. This is a guy in Ilia that missed weight for a bantamweight title fight against Brian Boulon at 139.5 roughly was where Ilia weighed in for 135. So he missed that one. And then he's kind of forced up as his career goes on to featherweight. He takes this one on short-ish notice, weighs in at 156. Jai Herbert at 155. Now for Jai Herbert, he is a guy that can box and box and box forever. And you know that. You love to see that. Former Cage Warriors champ. He took on a good level of competition before he came into the UFC. And I see it over there. I mean, last saying Jai is going to get destroyed. Matt Dunstan is saying, what's the Ilia and Patty beef? I'm not going to get into it. Patty said some not so nice things about Ilia's background and where he's from. And we don't like to be the TMZ of MMA, so we won't get into it. But when it comes to this one, Ilia's fired the F up. Ilia likes to box. Hopefully he doesn't want to box too much against Jai Herbert, though. And for Jai, his defensive grappling has been his Achilles heel in UFC. And I know, Matsuran Dubo was able to cold cock him, knock him down, and he saw the light.
It's a beautiful knockout.
Heard Dean let it go for way too long. But again, Eric Cote makes a great point. I don't know if 650 is worth it for Patty or Topuria. I don't either. I'm going to watch the fight. I'm going to enjoy it. I have Ilia. And Matt, just before I hand it over, the fans at Fight Night Picks, 90% have Ilia Topuria in this one.
Well, of course they do. Let's not pretend like Ilia's worse at any single skill in mixed martial arts. Like, even at the boxing, I think he has a good chance of winning this fight. And I agree. Jai Herbert has such an Achilles heel with his defensive grappling that if you're Topuria, the most likely path is to just take this to the mat, go for some ground and pound, soften him up with that, and try to get a submission. But Jai Herbert's not the most durable guy in the world, and he has proven that time and time again. And Ilia Topuria, although he is the smaller guy in this matchup, can absolutely bang with the best of them. And Damon Jackson might not be the most eye-catching talent in the world, but like, he's a pretty good MMA fighter. I think we can all agree to that. And Ilia made him not even look like he was UFC level. He beat the brakes off him, especially on the feet with his boxing. So I do think that if Topuria goes into this, even with a boxing mindset, he has a great chance to win. And that's probably not even what he's going to do. So I think Ilia is a justifiable favorite. I just don't like putting any money on people who are past like minus 400. But I don't look at this matchup as thinking, wow, Ilia, there's so many weaknesses in his game that Jai Herbert can really take advantage of. Unless Herbert does land that one big clean shot early, I don't see how he's able to have sustained success throughout this matchup.
Eagles 1985, Jaius knock him out in round 1. Unless Ilia gets really, really tired.
Now, first, last, you're right. Ilia is a featherweight, too small at 155. I 100% agree. As good as I think Topuria is, and I think he will be, at a minimum, a top 10 talent at the featherweight division. I said that about Jonathan Martinez once, too, and his career hasn't been as great since. But I really do think Topuria is that type of talent. But you're right. Frame-wise, he doesn't fit into 155 at all. Like, look at Max Holloway. As big of a featherweight as you can be, when he fought Poirier, like, he was tall, but he wasn't really as filled out as Poirier. And even he's a huge featherweight, so I do agree. Topuria, I think, should win this fight, but I don't want him to stick around at this weight class. And to what you said earlier, he's had multiple just weight issues. I know they've been at 2 different weight classes, but he really does have to figure that out if he wants to be the prospect we all believe he can be.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, when it comes to the short notice nature of things, you end up with a fight like this, a height difference like this, a reach advantage like this. And we'll move on to our next fight, Matt. We have Molly McCann taking on Luana Carolina, and this fight is one of the closer ones in terms of what the lines would say on this card. For Molly McCann, average minus 141, favorite for Luana Carolina plus 117. And this is one of those ones, again, when you look at it, the height, the reach, they would favor Luana Carolina. I would definitely think she's probably the bigger fighter on fight day. She's a tricky fighter, though, because I look at Luana Carolina's striking. She has the Muay Thai acumen from Brazil, a 2-time state champ, 2-time national champ. And you look at the way she fights, it's kind of a little bit like Sabina Mazo, but she has really good takedown defense. So when it comes to Molly McCann, she has really good boxing. And in certain fights, she has a big grappling advantage, and she uses it. And then in other fights, she's at a huge disadvantage with the grappling, and she gets totally out-grappled. So I'm eager to see this one. I think it really is a tricky one when it comes down to it. I actually have Molly McCann as a second leg to the question mark kicks parlay. I buried the lead. I have McCann at a minus, 140. We're only putting a bag of popcorn on this one. Like, I've already laid that one out today. There's not much going on for me.
To be fair, I think you say that every week.
And I have Nikita Krylov at a minus 200, so when you put those two together, it's plus 157. But again, I've also had Molly McCann. It's the last time I ever did a lock of the night, and that was against Tyler Santos, and that crashed and burned. So, again, confidence level on this card, there's not a ton of it, but I want to be honest with everybody out there. But again, Luana Carolina is a tricky matchup for Molly McCann.
She really is. And again, this is not my parlay because I have Paul Craig, and I really do think this is a tough matchup for Molly McCann. Like you said, on the feet, she's billed as a striker, but again, she does have the tendency to get outstruck, at least by bigger fighters, because frame-wise, she's always going to rely on her boxing. Is not a kicker whatsoever. Barely even throws the leg kick, really. So she really does have to rely on her distance management and her ability to get on the inside. So I do think against someone like Carolina, if you're not having any success and you are just constantly at the end of her jab, at the end of her leg kicks, you're probably not going to have any success throughout the whole entire fight. And you're right. Sabina Mazo, I do think, is a good example to bring up. I would even say, like, a Caitlin Chukagian is, like, the highest level. But again, Chukagian moves around quite a bit more, whereas Carolina will be a little bit more stationary. I do think Carolina can have a lot of success on the feet. But again, the weird thing about Molly McCann is everybody talks about her boxing. She kind of is a wrestler, though. She sort of is that female Chad Mendez, where she relies a lot on her, at least double leg, to set up some of her own boxing. And I do think that with Carolina, she falls into that Gustafsson category of, I have good takedown defense, but once you do get me to the ground, there's a lot of holes in her defensive grappling, and I do think someone like Molly McCann could just get on top and hold that top position. I'm not saying this is going to be the most aesthetically pleasing fight to watch, but I do think Molly McCann can at least make it a dirty fight and win via decision.
The only big disagreement that I have, Gosbach, Carolina will press McCann up against the cage and knee the heck out of her. I haven't really seen Luana Carolina do that. That's the only thing. Like, in the Botelho fight, it was really close. Was one of the rounds at 10-8. Carolina ends up getting the win. When she fights a super short notice her last time out, Godinez is just going. And then the short notice nature and being up a weight class, she ran out of gas in that one. So it really is a tricky one. But when it comes down to it, again, we have a look at the fan vote. And these ones are super skewed this week. But 66% of the fans going with McCann in this one. I have McCann. Gabriel is saying, Gabriel Killian, good to see you out there, sir, saying McCann wins inside the distance. When you look at it for McCann, I know she said this week that she wants to win inside the distance. She wants to get the bag. Which is something that Grimes wasn't able to do in Fredericton. That's a fun video if you go back and watch it. For Molly McCann in the UFC, if you look at it, she has never won a fight by finish. She has been finished in her first UFC fight by Jillian Robertson. The last time Molly McCann won a fight by finish was against Brioni Terrell back in 2018. So we'll see if that one can happen this weekend against Luana Carolina, a fun fight that we have. Now, Matt, Gunnar Nelson has been out forever. He's taken on Takashi Sato, and this should be a fun fight. Now, it wasn't originally supposed to be Takashi in this matchup, but he takes it on short notice. He definitely has some confidence for Gunnar. This was the last fight on his UFC deal, but he put pen to paper and signed an extension. I'm excited to see him, but again, when you have a guy that hasn't fought in years and years and years, when it comes to Gunnar Nelson, his last time out was against Gilbert Burns. He lost before that against Leon Edwards. His last win was when he brutalized Alex Oliveira back in 2018. He is a big favorite, as I mentioned. Let's just give those odds before we go too far into it. He opened a minus 300. He's a minus 509 as it sits. For Takashi, a plus 381. Maybe a good opportunity for Takashi in this matchup. I know we both have Gunnar, but it's kind of funny when a guy's been out for that long that he's this big of a favorite.
Because I keep on going back to, where does he have the biggest weakness in this matchup? And I understand on the feet, Takashi is a very dangerous opponent, but it's not like Gunnar Nelson's some terrible striker. And I know he doesn't have the best striking defense, but still, getting knocked out by Santiago Ponzinibbio doesn't all of a sudden mean anybody can knock out Gunnar Nelson. And I really do think that the grappling weakness of Takashi Sato is going to shine throughout this fight. Gunnar Nelson's weird though. Again, he has great jiu-jitsu, good stand-up, but the wrestling is somewhat lacking, and against Sato, it really will be telling to see how or if he is able to get this down to the mat. But I do think Gunnar is the supremely more skilled fighter in this fight, and unless he does get caught by an early shot on the inside, similar to what we saw Leon Edwards catch him with in the second round of their fight, hit him with a real nice elbow when they were in the clinch. Again, that's Leon Edwards that we're talking about, not Takashi Sato, who is a not poor grappler, but he's not the best one ever. Like a Miguel Baeza can submit you, and not the Bilal Muhammad again. He's a phenomenal grappler, but Bilal took him down, cut through his guard like butter, and really just dominated him on the mat in that fight. I do think Nelson, if he is able to get this down to the ground, should be able to submit him.
If you look at it and you consider Gunnar Nelson, and we talked about this at the start of the week, negative striker at minus 1.62 significant strikes per minute absorbed compared to landed. But again, number one significant strike accuracy in the division, and in UFC welterweight history, he's tied for most submission wins with Damian Maia and Chris Lytle at 6. So some legends, and a guy who's on commentary for BKFC, now part of Triller. So yeah, both of us going with Gunnar Nelson in this one. Both of us going with Paddy Pimblett in this one.
Always nice to hear from Chris Lytle though, isn't it?
That's true. That actually is. See how quick that one was? What is the sense? I mean, when we look at this fight, and if I'm not being...
This is a setup fight.
I'm not being a jokey joker, 90% of the fans going with Paddy Pimblett. He is a juiced up favorite if I've ever seen one on this card. Kazula Vargas can bang, and Paddy Pimblett can get hit. So if there was a monumental upset, I think there would be some hooping and hollering in the streets of Mexico, and probably even London in this case. Probably. But, Matt, I think it should be an interesting fight. It's a good opportunity for Pimblett. I think Kazula Vargas, again, was beating Brock Weaver until he lost. He beat Rong Zhu. But in my mind's eye, I think Luigi Vendramini is a better fighter than Kazula Vargas.
I would agree with that. And I don't even... we have differing opinions on Vendramini, but still, like, Paddy Pimblett's not a terrible fighter. We can all agree to that, right? He's a really good grappler. He has, I'd say, explosive stand-up. He's very busy on the feet, but he leaves huge holes in his striking defense. And when he does fight very physical guys, similar to what we saw in the Soren Bach fight, Bach was able to hold him down and really out-wrestle him in that matchup, to the point where Pimblett sort of kind of wanted a way out later on in that fight because he was so tired from all that grappling. So I do think that there is a very clear ceiling onto where Paddy Pimblett's potential is. I don't look at Pimblett and think he has limitless potential like, Khabib when he first came into the UFC. Like, I do think that Pimblett, on his best day, could be maybe the 12th ranked guy at lightweight. you know, I think he's really going to struggle against the top-ranked fighters, and honestly, maybe even putting him into the rankings is a higher ceiling than most would, because you have to realize how strong this weight class is that he's jumping into with someone like Alex Pereira, who just had to beat Bruno Silva, one of the scariest men in the middleweight division, in an absolute brutal fight. He's not even ranked in his division, and Bruno Silva's a really good fighter. So Paddy Pimblett's probably going to have to beat quite a few more guys after Kazulu Vargas just to get considered for a spot in the rankings. So I do think Pimblett has a long way to go if he isn't able to make these wholesale improvements to his game, but I do expect him to win against Kazulu.
Peter Shea saying, nice man, I work in Portsmouth, just across the way from Kittery. Love me some Portsmouth, New Hampshire action. But yeah, I mean, when it comes to this one, Paddy Pimblett, way too big of a favorite. And when I look at him in terms of a prospect, like, you're talking about, like, Umar Nurmagomedov, Paddy Pimblett, like, in that air, I'm much more confident taking an Umar Nurmagomedov where Pimblett is. So when I look at this one, yeah, I mean, to me, it's a little bit too juiced. I'm going to sit back, I'm going to watch the fight, I'm going to enjoy it, and hopefully everybody else does as well. Now, Matt, when it comes to Arnold Allen and Dan Hooker, a lot of Dan Hooker fans out there, and they're really supporting their guy this week, and he looked good on the scales.
Did he, though? He had sunglasses on. I don't think that's ever a good look, because if you have sunglasses on, you're hiding something, I think, and it's normally sunken in eyes. I don't know why you put that in front of your face. I think that's a really valid point, and that's why I worry about Dan Hooker and this whole weight cut. This is the problem.
No. I did that for a reason. Do I look scared? Do I look like I have something to hide?
You just look disappointed in what I'm saying. This is the problem. If Dan Hooker had a great weight cut, and if everything was, you know, sunshine and rainbows, he wouldn't be fighting at 145. Like, this is my whole point. You don't do a mid-career weight cut down to a weight class that you were notoriously very difficult to cut the weight to. I think this is a weird spot for Dan Hooker, and I always go back, this is sort of the few boxing lessons that I've brought to MMA, to where when you have somebody who isn't having a lot of success and they're looking for a switch in their career, well, okay, Dan Hooker was that fighter at 145, so you know what he did? Moved up to 155, was a better fighter because of it, ran into a few roadblocks at 155, and now I think he's looking for another real big switch, and I do think this is a really tough fight to take, and your first fight back at 145, because up at 155, just let me finish, he had a really tough level of competition, lost to the really good fighters, and then beat Nasrat Haqparast, sort of a reset. I think he should be fighting sort of a Nasrat Haqparast level guy at 145, and not Arnold Allen, who's in the top 5.
There's a comment up there, and Joe saying, how motivated is Hooker? If he took this fight on 6 weeks' notice, if he made the weight cut and it was really tough, I would say, man, like, the guy probably just wants to get paid, he probably just wants to stay active. But he took 6 months to make the weight cut. It's not like he used to. It was a very, very long camp. It was all very prepared. And I like what I did like what he looked like on the scale. And when I look at this fight for Arnold Allen, the one tricky thing is sometimes he gets active really early on in a fight.
Wait, do you disagree with my point, though, about him moving down in weight class? Do you not see this as, like, sort of him grasping at straws, looking for a difference?
Well, it's the same thing as Barboza moving down.
But
it's the
Barboza
same thing
only did it one time, though. It'd be like if Barboza then decided to move back up to lightweight and fight the 5th-ranked guy in the world.
I don't know about that. I look at it as when we're moving down, it's a little bit different. Now, Kyle O.M. hit up the super chat. Arnold, the man who yells at sheep, Allen, for the win. Maybe that's going to be his nickname.
He loves a $3 meal deal at, Tesco?
Good for him. And when I look at, even Jose Aldo was losing to some really good fighters, and then he moved down to 135.
But again, Craig, then you're talking about another weight cut afterwards.
The whole point of all of this is the fact that Dan Hooker is a much more active striker, and Arnold Allen is early on in his fights, and then as it goes on, sometimes he has the effect where he turns it down a little bit, or in certain fights he turns it up with different things. So again, the Gilbert Melendez fight is a good example where he just brutalized that lead leg, and then he was able to have a really good timeout. I have Arnold Allen in this fight. I do have some reservations against picking him in this one, but I am going to stick with my pick from earlier on in the week going with Arnold Allen.
I like Arnold Allen quite a bit in this matchup. I know the odds are close, and I rarely plant my flag into a contender, but I think if it wasn't for a lack of inactivity, I really do think Arnold Allen would be spoken about with the likes of Korean Zombie, Brian Ortega, like in the top of this division, if he was just able to fight more consistently. Like, what? The Korean Zombie's like a plus 500 underdog to Alexander Volkanovski coming up, and I know it's on short notice, Holloway dropped out, but let's all be very honest with ourselves. Arnold Allen versus Korean Zombie would be a heck of a fight. That'd be a very close one. I just think it does come down to inactivity for Allen. I do think he's going to be able to win this fight, but again, we don't put this at the fight of the night screen because we think it's going to be a wash one way or another.
59% of the fans at Fight Night Picks on Instagram going with Arnold Allen in this one, but again, not one of my more confident ones out there. I think Dan Hooker has a great opportunity to surprise in his move back down to 145. Now, we have a look at our main event of the evening. And the votes here on YouTube in that tab over there in the chat, 72% going with Tom Aspinall. And for Tom Aspinall, he has about, what, a quarter of the overall pro experience in MMA when it's compared to Alexander Volkov. Volkov at the top of the pops over with Bellator.
Not everyone.
But old Czech Congo, he just keeps coming back. He's got a title fight coming up this year against Ryan Bader. How wild is that? Really want to see a rematch where it was an eye poke that ended the fight. But when it comes to this one, Matt, Tom Aspinall, obviously in his back pocket, he has the grappling, he has the jiu-jitsu. And if you saw that little feature that John Gooden had out there with Tom Aspinall, I don't know if you saw it, where he's training in the shed, but there's no insulation. And they got the tiny little like padded area where he gets to grapple and box as well. But I think this is a great opportunity for Tom Aspinall to really... It's not shock you or I or the fans out there, but I think it's an opportunity to go, wow, this guy's a contender, this guy's a challenger. Maybe this guy gets John Jones or Tai Tuivasa or Stipe Miocic next. I don't think Cyril Gane's the play. I don't think they want to put those guys against each other. And you saw that little video where they were talking to each other and Tom was asking for some pointers on how to beat Volkov. But when it comes to this one, do you think Volkov has a good opportunity either early or late if he's going to win this one?
Well, he's weird because he is one of the few heavyweights who can keep a very consistent pressure and a really consistent output for 25 minutes. So it's odd because I think Volkov's chances to win just sort of remain at a steady 40% the whole entire fight. You know, that's a weird thing to say, but you never look at a round in which Volkov's output really drops off the face of the earth. And if anything, he can get stronger as the fight goes on. But in a lot of those cases, it's more the fact that he was kept in a defensive shell early on. It's just getting back to what his normal work rate is as the fight goes on, as his opponent tends to tire. This is a really fun fight though, like you said, because it's going to really tell us how good Tom Aspinall is. And listen, you guys know, I'm a big Raptors fan. I've seen a lot of people point out Westbrook and his triple-double last night, but I love Scotty Barnes. He's a rookie for the Raptors. He's very good. But for the last, I guess, they played the Lakers twice in the last, week and a half. So I've got to see Scotty Barnes play against LeBron James a couple times. And he's done really well in those games, which has given me a lot of confidence moving forward. This is Tom Aspinall's chance to go against LeBron James. Not really. Alexander Volkov is not the LeBron of the heavyweight division, but you get the idea. We are going to see, okay, how good are you on the ground? Because I do think Aspinall, up until this point, hasn't really had to take fights to the ground because his boxing has been so superior to most of his opponents that I just go out there, outbox guys, and even in the Arlovsky fight, he hurt him on the feet and then submitted him. But against Volkov, A, it's hard to reach his head because he's so big. B, he never stops throwing volume. And we have seen him at least struggle defensively with some of his grappling. So I do think that if Aspinall is able to get this to the mat, similar to what we said with Topuria earlier on in this card, it's not that he can't win his fight on the feet. It's just that it's probably going to be a lot easier if he is able to take it to the mat. And that's what I think Aspinall's going to do. But I still like him on the feet in this fight.
Again, when we look at this one for Volkov, when he has a lot of success, he's got a pressure. He's got a mix in his kicks. He has great kicks
Good
that
knees.
Isn't really talked about all that much. He uses his length very well. And in the UFC for Volkov, also consider this. He's only 33. It's crazy to look at a guy that's 34-9. He's only 33 years old. He had success in M1 Global. He had success with Bellator. Comes into the UFC, beats Tim Johnson, Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve, Fabrizio Verdum in a wild main event that I definitely didn't see coming. He loses to Lewis, again, last second flash knockout. Beats Greg Hardy, loses to Curtis Blades. He gets taken out 14 times. He beats Walt Harris with a kick. He beats Alistair Overeem quite convincingly. He loses to Cyril Gane by decision. He beats Marcin Tybura by decision. But he didn't look all that good in that Marcin Tybura fight. Again, I think we can all agree in that one. He started to slow down a little bit. Peter Shea with the Peyton Pritchard.
He destroys the Raptors, and it really upsets me.
He's such a fun guy to watch. He's one of every year you get a prospect like that where it's like, will they be able to get into the lineup? Will they be able to do anything?
Last year.
Peyton Pritchard, fun guy. But when it comes to this fight, again, Tom Aspinall's a little bit more like a Swiss Army knife, and I like his path to victory in this one. Again, he's only had 4 fights in the UFC, 3 performance bonuses over Jake Collier, Andrei Arlovsky, and Sergei Spivak. This is his biggest test to date. We know that. So again, I do like Tom Aspinall in this fight. I'm excited to see kind of the learning experience of a 5-round fight because, truth be told, we don't know what his gas tank is like in a 5-round fight, and it could just fall off after the 2nd round, and then we learn a little bit more. So again,
if it does against Volkov, he's getting finished shortly after. And again, that's why this fight is so fun. If that is an Achilles heel for Tom Aspinall, Volkov is the guy to expose it because he's the last heavyweight you want to be in the cage exhausted against just because of his output. Now, here's the odd thing about Volkov, though. I wonder about his weight and him weighing in at 255 because we sort of have a baseline for what he looked like at 240, where he was a good striker. He was faster, but he struggled a lot more with the wrestling defense. He weighs more, definitely helped his strength a lot more, became slower as a result, but his wrestling defense did become quite a bit better. I'm curious to see what the happy medium in between those two is going to be at 255 because he could either just be slower and have okay takedown defense, or he could get benefits from the two. So I'm curious to see if he will look different at all.
Jesse Crayford hitting up the super chat. Keep up the good work. I believe in what you guys do. Jesse, thanks for tuning in. I know you hit up the chat a little late, but you hit up the super chat. It definitely means a lot to us. So thank you to Jesse. And when I look at this again, I think VT makes a good point. No bets, just gonna enjoy today. That's what you gotta do sometimes. Rob G hitting up the super chat. Volkov, great chance if this goes late. Like 5 rounds, 100%. So again, both of us with Tom Aspinall, but this is another one of those ones. I wouldn't be shocked if Alexander Volkov goes out there and he's able to get the win. If we look at the odds, Volkov opened as a favorite, minus 146 average. He's a plus 111 right now. For Tom Aspinall, he's minus 133 as it sits. So Matt, as we always do with question mark kicks, there's about 700 tuning in. This is one of the busiest question mark kicks we've had in a while. Everyone. Only 138 likes. It definitely means a lot if you toss a like up there, get more people involved, but that chat is popping off. So Brandon Cotton saying, I love it. And Spams L2 has been hot and heavy in that chat saying I would be shocked if Volkov won.
I would be to a degree, just because anytime new contender loses for the first time, it is always a bit of a shock. Like when Chris Dawkins got flatlined by Derek Lewis, it's like, oh my goodness. And I know he had lost outside the UFC, but it does feel like every time you have this contender on their way up who is hyped up, their first loss always does feel like the biggest thing that's ever going to happen to their career. And then you look at someone like Derek Lewis, who is like, oh, it doesn't really matter. Like you can build after that. So it'll be a learning opportunity for Aspinall no matter what.
All right, Matt. So the first fight on the card, we're both going with Muhammad Mokaev to get the win. Cody Durden's a really, really tough test, but he might have his hands full here.
Yeah, I just think the unique style of Mokaev would be really interesting to watch grow in the UFC. And again, if nothing else, this is going to tell us at least how good Mokaev might be in the future.
All right, we move into our next. We have Cory McKenna taking on Elise Reed, a clash of styles. Going with Cory McKenna. Little bit nervous about, she's been out for a while, the concussion issues, so on and so forth, but do have her in this one.
And hopefully if she fights like how we hope she's going to, we won't really have to worry about her striking defense and her concussion issues, because if this fight goes how Cory McKenna wants it to, she's going to get it down to the mat very early and really implement her grappling, and I expect her to do that.
I've been climbing back, and I think there's only like a pick that separates us. I have the underdog in this one, Timur Valiev, who got down to a big favorite, which is really weird. But for me, I'm going with Timur Valiev in this one. But this is going to be a great fight. We have this one as a possible fight of the night.
Yeah, and I just think Jack Shorey is on his way to going for that prospect to a real contender. And if you beat someone like Timur Valiev, that's definitely the type of roadblock or hurdle, I should say, to get you to that point. And I think Jack Shorey's ready for it.
Mark asking how the brackets are looking. Mark.
I was so dumb. I have Auburn in the finals, and they were terrible the second half of the season. Not smart by me. I have them playing Baylor, though. I do like the way Baylor plays. They move the ball around quite a bit. But, who do you have winning?
I would have had Auburn, I guess. Again, we kind of talked about it before the show, but hot and heavy on them. But again, I missed the opportunity to put my bracket together.
I'm a big Chet Holmgren guy, though. I'm fascinated by him.
I was away this week. Matt, Nikita Krylov is my first leg of the QMK parlay. Everybody disagrees with me in the chat, in the votes, all of that. Again, it's one of those fights where do you go with the guy who needs to wait for a guy to make a mistake to win? I don't love going with those guys, and so I have Nikita Krylov here.
Or do you go with the guy who likes to win by submission but also lose by submission? I don't think Paul Craig is a perfect fighter by any stretch of the imagination, but if these guys grapple, and I mean even for 5 seconds, Paul Craig has a great opportunity to finish this fight, and I do think that at some point they're going to get together on the mat, and that is Paul Craig's world. He's a shark, and you don't want to be in the ocean with one of them.
Everybody's saying Craig. I just sit here and pat my back. We're all kidding, Matt. Shamil Abdurakhimov taking on Sergei Pavlovich. I'd stay away from this. I do have Sergei Pavlovich, but again, ground game, we don't really see it all that often. And on the flip side, I mean, Abdurakhimov hasn't necessarily looked the best in his last fights in terms of the way that they've been finished against Curtis Blades, against Chris Dawkins. Those are lofty guys in this division. And at the same time, he had a little bit of success in the striking against Shamil. And Matt, super chat from Charles. It is much appreciated,
Thank you, Charles.
You guys are driving the train, driving the show. I really do like that.
I had a gym teacher built like Shamil Abdurakhimov, and for that reason alone, I'm going to find it difficult to pick him in this fight. I kid, of course, but for Shamil, we did kind of set it up. He's one of those aim big, miss big strikers in the feet. He's a good grappler, but we just haven't seen that side of him in years, and I really do think it comes down to his cardio, and he doesn't really want to burn himself out using his wrestling, and for those reasons, it's going to force him to be a striker, and I do think that against Sergei Pavlovich, the last thing you want to be is sort of a wild striker on the feet, so I do expect Pavlovich to win.
All right, Matt, we'll move into our next one. Mike Grundy taking on Makwan Amirkhani. Both going with Mike Grundy in this one.
Got Grundy.
Both guys grapple. One guy went to the Pan American Games and had some success there. Jai Herbert taking on Ilya Topuria. Ilya's a giant favorite. I do have Ilya, but again, this is another popcorn fight.
Ilya's better than Jai at everything, though.
He's not better at,
Pretty
again,
much.
When he blitzes and uses boxing, he's great. From long range in terms of the boxing, Jai Herbert's better.
Well, yeah, but that's only because, like, frame-wise, Jai Herbert's bigger, though. Like, that's just because of the weight class. That's something that a lot of people have. I don't think, technically, Jai Herbert's going to be able to hang with Topuria in a lot of areas. And the problem is, even if Herbert has success in one or two moments, I just don't think he's going to be able to keep it up for enough minutes to go out there and win rounds. And it's going to be hard to try to finish someone like Topuria, who is so relentless with their attacks. So it should be a fun fight, but I do like Topuria.
Our next one, we have Molly McCann taking on Luana Carolina. Got Molly McCann. Yikes. Ugh. As the second leg of the QMK parlay to -140. Again, that Tyler Santos lock, that was the last time I ever had a lock. It still weighs heavy in my mind. Mark Jacasey to beat Fiziev. Jacasey's got a big time fight coming up next week against Borshev. We'll see how he makes out there.
That's a great fight, though.
Yeah, it is. Going here with Molly McCann.
I think Molly McCann should be able to win this one. Again, close matchup because at the longest range in this fight, Carolina's going to have a lot of success. At the mid-range, though, it's going to be really interesting because McCann has good boxing, but she is hittable. Like, even go back to the Cachoeira fight. Priscilla has heavy hands. That's about it. But even Priscilla was able to hit Molly quite a few times and really get some damage going on her. So I do think McCann's going to need her takedown at some point. But against Carolina, if you need a takedown, you can probably get it.
Charles hitting up the super chat once more. Charles, you're the MVP of the chat
you,
today.
Charles.
It goes to Charles. Thank you. We have Gunnar Nelson, Takashi Sato, both going with Gunnar Nelson. Hopefully he decides to grapple.
And I'm interested to see if this is going to be top 15 Gunnar Nelson coming back. Like, where is he in his career? Is this a guy who's ready to come back and go on sort of one last run, if you will? Hashtag Alistair Overeem when he was main eventing every other week, it seemed. Or is it, you know, sort of a former fighter, or not former fighter, but former top contender who's had a lot of injuries, been away from the sport? We've seen this story time and time again. So it'll be an interesting comeback fight for Gunnar Nelson, but I do expect him to win.
Austin asking about the fight. Jesse Crayford hitting up the super chat.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. Austin Laxon saying, why is Topuria fighting at 55? Short notice, and he had some issues, in the, what was it, the Charles Jourdain fight that didn't happen. So both of us going Nelson. Mook is saying Gunnar is overrated. Gunnar is like a weird fighter. You can't look at the numbers. You can't look at the performances. He's just an oddball of a fighter. And
he's a little overrated.
He's too big of a favorite in this spot. Both going Paddy Pimblett against Kazula Vargas. Again, if Vargas wins, probably wouldn't be the biggest shock on the card of a guy winning because Paddy Pimblett can get a little bit wild with his hands. More so with his kicks than with his hands. But when it comes to Paddy Pimblett, he's one of those guys. I do expect him to come through in a big spot.
I do. I just hope that we see the grappling side of Paddy Pimblett in this fight so people can stop talking about him like he's the second coming of Mike Tyson. Yes, he has okay hands and he has good power, but his stand-up is not the brightest spot of his game. He is an extremely talented grappler, so hopefully if he is able to go out there, let's say just get like a second round rear naked choke against Kazula Vargas where he out-grappled him in the first, just a pretty steady, convincing win. That's kind of what Paddy Pimblett needs, I think, for his career, just sort of reset everyone's expectations for him, but I do like Pimblett in this matchup.
Joe hitting up the super chat. Joe, we appreciate that. And when I look at this one, I expect Pimblett to try and grapple, try and get it into the wrestling and the grappling. I've got Arnold Allen over Dan Hooker, but again, with co-main in the main event, I'm not the most confident with these ones, I gotta be honest.
Yeah, they are really close fights. I just think Arnold Allen's the steadier fighter, especially at this weight class. I worry about Dan Hooker resetting himself back down to 145. Again, when you change weight classes one time, I get it. It's a reset. It's a new chance to fight some different opponents. To then decide to go back down to another weight class later on in your career, it's a really questionable move. And hey, maybe Dan Hooker goes out there, hits Arnold Allen with a flying knee, and then fights Brian Ortega next, and he's right back in there in the top 5, and it's like he never left. I just think it's a strange move at this stage of his career, and that's why I like Allen in this matchup.
MY saying, is this even live? Like, is this real life? It is. It is. And we look at the main event. I mean, the chat's going wild. It's a great conversation. Go saying preach, Matt. Again, I worry about Hooker's activity on the feet and Arnold Allen if he's able to keep up. But when it comes to the main event, we touched on it. I mean, Alexander Volkov, if he's able to pressure, if he's able to use his kicks, if he's able to slow down Tom Aspinall, giant opportunity for him to get a win. He opened as the favorite for Tom Aspinall. More methods of victory. I'm eager to see if Tom Aspinall, and we had a little bit of a, will it happen, won't it happen bet there last weekend. Did it even happen?
Did not happen.
But Terrence McKinney went for 3 takedowns in the first round against Drew Dober. He got 2 of them. But when it comes to this fight, and where I relate that to this.
After 90 seconds, though.
I wonder if he did it in 90 seconds. Will Tom Aspinall go for a takedown on Volkov? You think he will?
If he doesn't, he's going to lose, I think. Because here's the problem. You at least need the threat of the takedown against someone like Volkov. And again, with Volkov, he's a great striker, especially early on in fights, getting his range. But as the fights go on, you do worry about what version of Aspinall we're going to get. So I do think that if Aspinall can take him down early, at least negate some of the great cardio of Volkov, kind of like what we talked about earlier, to where Volkov, it's not like he gets stronger as the fight goes on. It's just you let him set into a pace that he just will not get out of. And I do think that once he gets into that pace, it's going to be very difficult for Tom Aspinall to then try to break it up and start going off with his own striking. But I do think the threat of the takedown will be very important for Aspinall. Here's the question mark, though. If Aspinall is able to win by submission, I honestly do think they give him the title shot. And I know it's weird to say if he wins by submission and not by knockout, but here's the thing. Nobody at the heavyweight division right now is a huge submission threat, especially in the top, title challengers. And I do feel like that is just the unique wrinkle that the UFC could look to try to throw him into a title fight against... I know you said maybe not Cyril Gahn, but he is sort of still in there. John Jones is a tough name. I guess I still have Tom Aspinall, but I guess end on this. Do you think this is a title eliminator?
Yeah, I honestly do. I mean, again, when you look at it...
Because I have no idea, to be completely honest.
No, when you look at it, and let's have a look at the UFC's bookings kind of moving forward.
That's
and you have this card. It is a big fight. It is one of those ones where, listen, a lot is
hometown fight for Aspinall. Big chance in it. Yeah,
So if you look at the heavyweight division right now, the way that it is in terms of fights being made, obviously Stipe doesn't have a fight. John Jones doesn't have a fight. Cyril Gahn doesn't have a fight. And Ngannou's out. He just had that surgery. Derek Lewis, but he's coming off a loss. Bam Bam's on a 5-fight win streak. So maybe you make, again... Tuivasa, Miocic, who's off a loss, but it was for a title, Aspinall, or Jones. Those are the 4 names. I think Gahn needs another win before he gets an opportunity. Because, again, he had the interim belt, then he had a title fight. I think he needs one more. So maybe the winner of, that Rosenstrike fight, maybe that's the one that you go with. Rosenstrike's fighting who? Merson Tybura or Chris Dawkins, Razor Blades. That's next weekend's main event. We'll see what happens there. Justin saying winner of this versus Ty, Jones versus Stipe, Gahn versus Blades. I'm fine with that one too. I don't have a huge argument against it, but again, a lot of people thinking that we're androids over in the comments section. We gotta get plugged in after the show.
It feels like a lot of times, especially in divisions, you'll have a division that's stagnant for a few months. You'll have other divisions where they do have a lot of people booked at once. It's nice that right now the heavyweight division is actively booked. A lot of people in the top 10 either have just fought or are fighting in the near future. It's always fun when you have, 8 or 10 guys in the top 15 all active in a very short amount of time, because it does allow you to play matchmaker a little bit more or a little bit better as you progress. So I think this should be a great opportunity, especially if Aspinall is able to win. Huge name in his hometown, but this is a big fight for both guys.
Big opportunity for both guys. We have Blades versus Dawkins coming up next weekend. We'll release that video a little bit later than we have because we've been burning the candle at both ends, getting them out super early. So we're going to take a little bit more time on that one.
Matt punched Craig to prove it's live.
But...
See?
I love that. I mean, they think we got Bill with the cue cards behind us, but when it comes to next weekend, it should be a great card. A lot of support over in that chat. Everybody that hit up the super chat, everybody that always is able to add a lot to that. MPTV saying, is this a deep fake?
Important fight for both guys too next weekend.
If it was, we wouldn't tell you. And that is true as well. And we'll get to see Chris Dawkins with his BJJ that we tend to talk about a lot, but you never really see in his fights.
Curtis Blades, who every time he gets the chance to fight a top contender just seems to come up a little bit too short.
That much is true. So it should be a fun one. Make sure if you're not subscribed already, you do that. You toss a like to this video and the rest of them. It certainly means a lot. And keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, as we always say. Let's get into it.
Let's